On behalf of Southern India Chamber and Mitra, welcome you all to this very important session on NBFC and the role forward by Mr. T.T. Srinivasa Raghavan, Managing Director, Sundaram Finance. I request Mr. Ganapathy, President SICKI and the Chairman of Trigen Group to kindly welcome formally and conduct the proceedings.
Thank you, Dr. Raghavan, T.T. Sudhir and Mr. Arun Alagappan. It's a high privilege and honor for SICKI to invite you for this session. Of course, Arun is a Vice President of SICKI. He joins me in adding its welcome to you, TT. TT Srinivas Raghavan, who old habits die hard, is arguably the best face on CNBC and ET now on the space of NBFC. The NBFC sector has been the most talked about sector in recent times. The stress it went into this from a very difficult situation, and it needs to come out well out of this situation for the Indian economy to survive. And I thought we have possibly the best person amongst us to introduce TT and the concept, Mr. Arun Alagappan, Managing Director and CEO of the Chola Finance. And TT is an old friend of mine, a person whom I've known from 1965. I've always maintained this, that the world of finance got a great brain, but TT during his school days was arguably one of the best off spinners in Chennai. I think Indian cricket lost a great one. Possibly if TT had played, Venkatragavan would have felt challenged at that time. So I think NBFC's gain is cricket's loss. And with those few words, I introduce our Vice President Arun Alagappan to take this webinar forward. Over to you, Arun.
Good evening, everyone. I would like to welcome you all to the webinar, NBFC and the role going forward. I would also like to use this opportunity to welcome and introduce our speaker for the day, Mr. T.T. Srinivas Raghavan. TTS, as he is fondly called, frankly doesn't need an introduction really. However, for formality, TTS presently serves as the Managing Director of Sundaram Finance Limited. He is also involved in his executive capacity with various other institutions, including Sundaram Home Finance, Sundaram Asset Management Company, and the International Finance and Leasing Association. He's also an executive committee member of the FIDC, the Finance Industry Development Council. I eagerly look forward to hearing his thoughts during the course of today's session. Today, as we discuss the COVID-19 pandemic that has affected people and businesses across the globe, our NBFC sector is no different. Our key stakeholders in the NBFC industry, including the banker partners, our customers, investors, real estate, and OEM partners, are facing challenges in ensuring continuity of their operations. The stress is bound to spill over and impact the NBFC sector in the short term. However, many economists and business leaders across industries continue to be optimistic and have increasingly converged on the idea of a V or U-shaped economy recovery. So this would mean that while our NBFC industry shall see a definite stress in the short term, we should expect the disbursement growth and stress on the assets to revert back to normalcy, hopefully by H2 of financial year 2021. As a financial engine that services the liquidity requirements of the vast majority of the rural economy, the economic recovery requires the NBFC industry to stay healthy. The RBI has already announced a slew of measures like the TLTRO to ensure sufficiency of liquidity for the NBFC sector. I'm sure that there shall be more initiatives from the government and the RBI towards supporting the NBFC sector in the days to come. I'd like to pause now and hand over the session to our anchor, Mr. T.S. Sudhir, to take the session forward with Mr. TTS. Looking forward to hearing all your thoughts. Thank you all, and over to you, Sudhir.
As arguably one of India's finest anchors and best-known TV personality takes over, I'm duty-bound to thank our knowledge partner in this, Mitra, who's helped us put this series together. And of course, for the first time, I'm seeing on the window Mr. Ravindran, Executive Committee member of SICKI, who has sponsored these webinar series. Thank you very much, Ravi. It's a high privilege and honor for us to recognize you. And thanks a lot and stay safe. Cheers. Over to
Yes, sir. Thank
Sudeep.
you, sir.
Right. Thank you very much, Mr. Ganapathy. Arun Alagappan really has set the tone on what is going to be a very enlightening talk, because after yesterday's talk on the banking sector, the NBFC is really providing the last mile connectivity. So it would be very interesting to listen to Mr. T.T. Srinivasaraghavan, who, as Mr. Ganapathy says, is largely responsible for putting the money in our pocket for a variety of needs. He will be talking about NBFCs and the road ahead, and tell us whether that road is full of potholes, has too many speed breakers, and what we need to do in order to rev up the economy engine after the COVID-19 crisis. Over to you, Mr. Srinivasaraghavan.
Thank you, Sudhir, and thank you, Arun and Ganpa, for all the kind words. Ganapathy, I'm happy, 50 years has sort of certainly made you go a little soft. So you remember things about me which I don't really deserve, but thanks all the same. Right. So, but coming to the business on hand, as usual, I find myself in a position talking about probably one of the segments of the economy which is almost always in the news for the wrong reason, right? So because of this, many years ago, I sort of once jokingly, but only half jokingly said that NBFC is perhaps, the most commonly publicly used four-letter word, right? People don't have any compunction using this four-letter word, but that's almost what it's become synonymous with, right? But that's been the lot of this industry. But anyway, so what I'd like to do a little bit today is lay out some perspectives of where we are today thanks to COVID, and also very briefly allude to the fact that COVID is not the only thing which has happened to the NBFC industry in recent times, right? And mostly focus on what are the very real challenges that we face as a sector, and why it is vitally important for NBFCs to be back on track as early as possible, because the growth engine of India's economy is incomplete, if I may say that, without the active role of NBFCs. So NBFCs are a very integral part of India's growth story. They have been over the decades, and I believe they will be even more so as we go forward. So with those brief introductory words, let's jump in. So what the current COVID crisis has done to NBFCs can broadly be sort of bucketed into 3 or 4 areas. Number one is liquidity, right? One of the things which I think has sort of made front page headlines every day is this liquidity crisis for the NBFC sector. Now we'll talk a little bit more about what this means. The second one is in terms of demand, right? What's going to happen post, whenever there is a flattening or a full remission of this curve? What's going to happen on the demand side, and how are NBFCs going to handle that? Number 3 is what's going to happen to asset quality. Now, obviously, that is a valid concern, and that is something which is very much on everybody's radar. And the fourth, and to my mind, most important perhaps of all, is what is the regulatory response to all of these things, right? Because obviously, NBFCs being regulated entities, much of our lives, much of our fortunes are determined by and dictated by the regulator, which is the Reserve Bank of India. And as many of you who are part of the sector, or those who watch the sector, you would have all seen that in recent days, RBI has been very much in the forefront, responding to many of the requests of the industry. They have come out with several proactive measures as well in response to some of the things we've raised, but much remains to be done, because as is probably now overstated, these are really extraordinary times, right? I don't think anyone at all can say that they've seen anything vaguely resembling this. In fact, I was saying to a group of my colleagues a couple of days ago, I asked my 96-year-old father the other day whether he remembers, the Spanish flu or the aftermath. And he says, no, he was born in 1924. So he says, even for me, I have very little recollection, because I guess they didn't have such an active media in those times. So he has no recollection. So clearly this is a once in a century event, something that none of us is in any way trained or equipped to handle. And therefore, I think the degree of the challenge increases dramatically, right? So that's kind of where we find ourselves in. So let me try and briefly touch upon these four things, and then I will shut up and then listen to all the questions that you have, all the comments that you may have, and we should make this as interactive as we can. So number one, liquidity, which has probably been the top, as I said, headline. And where this is coming from is as follows. First, Reserve Bank, on the 27th of March, when the governor made his first set of announcements, he said all lending institutions are permitted to offer moratorium to their borrowers. While correctly the governor left the decision to the lenders, in practical terms, from a borrower's point of view, it became an entitlement. So in effect, what's happened is that nearly 100% of NBFC's borrowers have sought moratorium. And, realistically, there is no way we can deny the moratorium to our customers. So while we have granted moratorium to all our customers, on the liabilities side, our lenders, namely the banks, the mutual funds, the investors in our securitized paper, they in turn have not been obliged to give us the moratorium, right? Banks, many of them have taken the view that the moratorium is not applicable to NBFCs, and the mutual funds anyway are not governed by RBI, right? So they are not in any way obliged to pass this on. So clearly, in the short run, this is creating an ALM mismatch, right? Because the NBFC offers moratorium to its borrowers, but in turn is not able to get a moratorium from its lenders. So that's number one. Number two, as I said, is demand, right? Once this is behind us, what are the expectations are that the economy is going to take it's going to take a while before it even starts limping back, which means for many of us, and opinions can be varied in terms of the number of quarters, but many of us in the industry believe that the 2 quarters ending September, which is Q1 and Q2 of this financial year, are going to be pretty muted in terms of demand, right? So if there is going to be muted demand, how are NBFCs going to manage their costs, right? Because as many of you know, NBFCs are pretty much a fixed cost model, right? And therefore, absence of demand or muted demand for the first 6 months is certainly going to create its own challenges. This is number two. Number three, of course, as I said, asset quality, which is a very real concern. Fortunately, based on representations that we made to Reserve Bank, we've got a limited sort of forbearance from the regulator, where they've said that during the moratorium period, there will be a standstill, and therefore there will be no deterioration in asset quality during the moratorium period, which means if an account was not non-performing on the 29th of February, it will continue to remain non-performing on the 1st of June when the moratorium ends. So there is a standstill, but I'm afraid that is only for the moment a band-aid. what we're really looking for, and again, this is part of representations that have gone to the Reserve Bank, what we really need is an extensive restructuring that has to be permitted, especially for retail and MSME borrowers. Because what these 3 months are going to do effectively is set many people back, not 3 months, but several years, right? Because the momentum that's been lost in these 3 months, the disruptions of businesses, the disruptions of livelihoods is something that is going to be rather severe. And I'm afraid a 3-month moratorium, while it definitely provides breathing space, is not going to be a silver bullet or a magic wand. And therefore, it is that I speak about a longer term, well thought out restructuring, penalties or without any deterioration in asset quality being concomitant with this, because we also have to bear in mind that we live in an era of credit bureaus. So people are, very sensitive about their credit scores. And if there is a deterioration in credit quality at a time like this, and if somebody has a bad credit report, you can be sure that no lender is going to look at them. So it's absolutely critical to preserve and protect the credit quality, especially of the vulnerable section of borrowers, which are the small retail borrowers, the MSME borrowers, etc. And that is something which I hope will receive the attention of the authorities in RBI and indeed in the Ministry of Finance. The last one, as I said, has to do with regulatory forbearance. Some of it I talked about, but it is not only these issues that we're talking about, it's also the whole area of, how we recognize our non-performing assets. What are the provisions that will be occasioned because of accounts, slipping in terms of their asset classification? There have been some demands from industry, that is from the borrower side, saying that the NPA classification, instead of being pegged at 90 days, should indeed be shifted to 180 days. I've seen some demands which say 360 days. Now, these are, demands at this point, but I think realistically, there will be a need for regulatory forbearance on part of RBI. This is not merely for NBFCs. All of what I'm saying will be equally applicable to banks, because they too have large exposures to the MSME sector. They too will have a large number of moratoria which they've granted to their borrowers, and their borrowers too, like ours, are going to struggle when it comes to getting back on track. I mean, this is going to be a period of rebuilding. It's going to take time for these guys, as I said, to rebuild their livelihoods. And therefore, I think for everyone concerned, there needs to be an appreciation of how difficult a situation this is and how difficult a situation this is going to continue to be over the 6, 9, maybe even 12 months. So it's going to be a long climb. It's going to be a hard climb. But the good news is that this industry has survived many a crisis in the years gone by. No doubt, as I myself said, this is an extraordinary crisis, the likes of which none of us has seen. But that is no reason to believe that we won't overcome this as well. But as as the famous song goes, with a little help from our friends, I think we'll be able to do it. So let me stop here and hand it back to Sudhir. And I'm open for questions from all the participants.
Right. Thank you very much, TT sir, and very interesting and also a little scary the way you have kind of put out a rather dire prognosis that it's going to be a long and hard climb ahead of us, and it's going to take much more than 6 to 9 months. Lots of questions already come. So in your times, probably you were not used to bowling the dusra, but probably here you need to spin your way out of trouble in case if you find some of the questions tricky. I'll start with the rural sector, sir. NBFCs have been the extended arm for the last mile delivery of small ticket financial support to the needy, especially in the rural sector. how is this present crisis, how is it playing out in the rural areas right now?
Okay, I don't pretend to have the full answer, but I'll tell you whatever I've heard so far based on conversations that I've had with my own team and also with colleagues in the industry. It seems fair to say, and I'm open to correction, it seems fair to say that in general, rural India has been less affected than urban India by the epidemic itself. And there is some validation for that when you look at the green zones in the country. Most of them would appear to be in semi-urban and rural India. So that's the first piece of good news, that rural India is less affected by the pandemic. Now, moving beyond the pandemic, there's actually a number of positives as I look at rural India. Number one, we had a decent monsoon last year, as a result of which the crop was very good. And that is borne out by the fact that we're having an excellent harvest as we speak, right?
Yes.
Number three, sowing, as I've read somewhere, sowing is 40% higher than at the comparable point last year. So that too is a positive for the winter crop. Number four, the forecast for the first forecast for the monsoon from the IMD says 100% normal, and common sense would let you believe this because we've stopped polluting, the atmosphere for 2 full months. So hopefully Mother Nature is happy, so she will give us bountiful rain. And there's this huge procurement push on the part of the government. So the government is pulling out all the stops. They're, sort of breaking away from the rigid APMC norms. Mandis are coming up all over the place. So I think if you really look at it, if there is good news at all in our country today, most of the good news would seem to pertain to rural India.
Right. One of the IMD predictions has also been about Kerala, which has predicted more than normal rainfall for Kerala. Kerala is one state that will probably not want a more than normal rainfall. May I also request all the listeners, participants to share their questions in the chat window so that our backend team can take it from there. Now, a second question also related to the auto sector. Now, the auto sector has been sluggish. I mean, I'm talking specifically about the rural sector. Now, companies like Mahindra & Mahindra, in fact, there was an interview of Mahindra & Mahindra on one of the business channels the other day where they spoke about they are having a large inventory of tractors. So even if production does not start, they say they can start selling. Now, how would NBFCs look at this kind of a scenario? Would a bit of nudging from the NBFCs be required in order to get the sales going?
Oh, absolutely. See, I think today NBFCs are fairly significant financiers of tractors, and just not tractors, but the entire range of farm equipment. So all of us, all the major NBFCs are active players in farm equipment financing. So yes, absolutely. And in fact, we're already in dialogue with, in some of the areas where dealerships are already open. We're talking to them. We're talking to the tractor OEMs. We are looking forward. As I said, that is probably the first segment of our business which will kick off as soon as the lockdown starts to go.
Even if the income levels have been dropping, you said that the scenario is better in the rural areas, but they have taken a hit as far as income levels are concerned.
But that should improve because, as I said, the harvest has been bountiful. I think MSPs have been very healthy. So I think there may be a lag. Usually, their cash flows sort of come in the months of April and May. This time maybe it will push through to June, July. But we believe that rural India is going to be in much better shape than anyone else.
So let's look forward in a post-corona India. What would be the areas that NBFCs, in your opinions, are likely to focus on or should focus on in terms of lending?
Okay. I think number one, as I said, is the agri-related sector. And agri doesn't just mean the farm sector, because if there is rural prosperity, rural prosperity has a big knock-on effect in terms of even automobile sales, utility vehicles, small commercial vehicles, and even small cars, right? These are all things which are fairly active parts of the rural buying. So if there is overall rural prosperity, this should flow through into some of that, it should also flow through into consumer product buying, right? FMCG, that sort of thing. So that is one segment. The second segment, where of course we're all waiting with bated breath for the government to announce its stimulus package. Our belief and hope indeed is that there will be a major thrust on infrastructure, right?
Yeah.
Which will be predominantly roads, but also in all other areas of infrastructure. So we see that being a big growth opportunity, whether it's for construction equipment, whether it's for supporting equipment, for road laying equipment, backhoe loaders, the entire range which goes into the construction activity. We see that as being one of the big growth drivers, because if we have to pump prime the economy, and if jobs need to be generated, this is going to be key. Expectation is that infra will be so these two will be the main pegs. Agri on the one side, infra on the other side.
Okay. A question coming in from Mr. Ravichandra Babu. He asks, would RBI allow the transfer of license of deposit taking NBFCs from existing entities to a new management? He says there is no clarity on this as of now.
I don't know that I'm competent to answer that question, but my general sense is that RBI in recent years has been very reluctant to grant licenses for deposit taking, and if there is a transfer of a deposit taking license, I think the rigor that they demand, I think, is extremely high. But as I say, I'm not the most competent person to have. That is a regulatory call.
Okay. Mr. K. Chandrasekharan has sent this question. Fixed deposits were the major source of raising funds for the NBFCs in the past. Many people were depending on the interest on their deposits. Today, what are the guidelines on fixed deposits and how to bring back the FD culture, and what is the safety mechanism available?
Right. Yeah, he's right. There was a time when many of us, the early hire purchase companies, funded ourselves almost exclusively from public deposits. That era has changed. Today, if you look, I can speak for Sundaram Finance, about 12% or so of our overall liabilities comes from fixed deposits. The rest is all, bank funding, capital market funding, so on and so forth. So the relative importance of public deposits in the funding mix of NBFCs has come down significantly. And as I said, in recent years, RBI has been rather reluctant to permit NBFCs to accept fixed deposits. So the fixed deposit accepting NBFCs today are really the old NBFCs, people who've been in the business for 30, 40 years, who were traditionally accepting fixed deposits. We are the guys who continue to accept fixed deposits. As far as regulations are concerned, they're pretty tight regulations on the part of RBI. They're pretty tight in terms of how many times our net worth we can accept deposits. There's a ceiling on, the deposit rates that we can offer. There's all kinds of restrictions which make sure that people can't do crazy things. However, unlike bank deposits, finance company fixed deposits do not have insurance cover. So we don't have the equivalent of the DICGC guarantee for NBFC deposits. That's an important distinction.
Right. Mr. S.K. Tulsian is asking this specifically about the mid-sized NBFCs, and he's asked, most of the mid-sized NBFCs are shoring up their capital positions by selling securitized pools to the bank to release liquidity. Now, such liquidity generated will be utilized by them for repayment of their debts. What is the future of such mid-sized NBFCs?
Brilliant question. If I may say, Mr. Tulsian, for us in the industry and through the industry body FIDC, of which I'm an active member, our big push with RBI, with the government, with anyone who's willing to listen, is that the small and mid-sized companies need to be somehow supported, because the larger ones will find their own means to fund themselves. The small and medium companies, so our latest representation is that at least for companies below 500 crore asset size, if there can be a special window that can be opened up, that is something we've asked for. And of course, RBI, though the TLTRO was a little bit of a fiasco, RBI has provided 50,000 crores through NABARD, SIDBI and NHB, which is intended to be on lent to the smaller and mid-sized NBFCs. So we believe that is a viable source of funding for the smaller guys. But apart from that, as I said, as an industry body, we are actively pushing for a line of credit to be opened up specifically to address the small and medium-sized companies. So we are in wait and watch mode. Representation has gone, I think 3 days ago. We're sending in a follow-up memorandum to the RBI and to the government. So that is something which is top of mind for us as an industry.
Right. The next question comes in from Anmol Shah. He asked, with the asset quality declining for various NBFCs, especially the loans given to the SME segment, it has taken its toll on all NBFCs, whether it is Bajaj Finance or anyone else in the market. Now, do you think at such cheap valuations, there is a possibility of some kind of consolidation taking place in this space?
Hard for me to say. In theory, it would sound like it is, but also given the unknowns, and even if you look at some of the results that have come out of some of the private sector banks, I think retail portfolios seem to have been under significant stress. So I don't know whether too many people will be adventurous looking for M&A type activity, but who knows? I'm not a capital markets guy, so I'm not the expert on that.
Okay. Deepak Jain wants to know about the construction sector. What are the prospects for the construction sector? And especially from the point of view of NBFCs, do you see private, what do you see private finance firms doing in this kind of situation for the real estate sector?
Real estate, I think, is a very tough game. And I think everybody realizes it. Mr. Deepak Parekh recently in a webinar had talked extensively about what the risks are and what some of the potential ways out of it are. So I think the real estate sector, if I say the NBFC road is a rough road, I think the real estate road is probably an even rougher road, right? Because there you have also a slew of accumulated problems, because the real estate sector has been reeling now for nearly 3 years, right? And then you have the fiasco with DHFL. So you've had a whole lot of other messes in the real estate financing segment to unravel. And my advice or my view on that would be, I think one should be extra cautious, and extreme prudence is what is advocated dealing with that segment, because I think there is still a lot of unknowns, if you like, hidden risks which we don't necessarily see today.
Yeah, I'm sure the real estate sector is going to see a sea change in the days to come. Mr. Ranganathan is talking about NBFC's attempt to raise funds through debentures has had only limited success. How do you see the funding situation in the coming days?
Yeah, as I said right at the beginning during my opening remarks, funding is going to be probably one of the topmost challenges.
Yes.
So there are no easy answers, which is why I talked about the new instrumentalities that we are talking about in terms of the SIDBI, NHB windows. There's some talk now that an SPV, the government may actually set up an SPV and bonds will be issued, which will be subscribed to by RBI, so on and so forth. So right now, I think the risk aversion levels are very high. So we'll have to wait for this risk aversion to somewhat temper. And then as demand starts coming in, I think the flow will start slowly. It's not going to happen in a hurry, which is the reason I said, I don't expect anything to happen till September.
Right. Umesh Agarwal is asking this question. Of course, this has also been spoken in the past about NBFCs have given moratorium, but they have not received the same from banks. And the same has been represented to the RBI many times. What is the reason in your view? Why is the RBI so reluctant to extend this relief to NBFCs?
Actually, to be perfectly fair, I don't think this is RBI's problem. RBI, I've read the governor's speech and I've read the follow-on circular to that. Nowhere has RBI said that this is not applicable to NBFCs. It says all term loans outstanding on March 1, 2020. So if an NBFC has a term loan from a bank, it is as eligible for this term loan as anybody else. It is really the reluctance on the part of banks to pass on the moratorium. And also to be perfectly fair, I must add that there are a few banks who have indeed offered the moratorium to their NBFC customers. So it's not an across the board situation, but certainly it is not RBI's fault in any way because they have not ruled on this at all.
Do you anticipate any kind of merger synergy within the NBFC space in order to kind of tide over this economic crisis that we are in the midst of?
Yeah, that was the earlier question on consolidation. Again, as I said, in theory, you would definitely believe that because it's usually in times of stress that these sort of M&A type activities happen, consolidation happens. But to my mind, maybe we're too early in the cycle to be having that conversation because I think everyone is struggling with basics. I think once we get to some semblance of normality, I think is when these conversations will start.
Okay. Hemant Chodia asks, should NBFCs sacrifice 3 months of interest in order to give breathing space to the end borrower? It will mean losing some money in the short term, but can it kickstart the borrower's business post the lockdown? Would that be in your mind?
Hemant, I don't exactly understand your question, but I'll try and answer it. What the RBI has prescribed is this. They've said the installments of March, April, and May, the borrower can be given a moratorium. However, interest will accrue on the installments of March, April, and May. Now, when you collect that interest has not been spelled out in the RBI circular. So one view that you could take, and they've also talked about elongating the contract. So for example, if it is a 36-month contract where you've given them a holiday for March, April, and May, now these 3 installments will effectively become installment numbers 37, 38, and 39. And the interest which is accrued on these 3 installments, you could technically collect as installment number 40. Right? Me, hopefully is good. I hope that answers your question.
Mr. Bala asks, the amount available with SIDBI and NABARD are made available mainly to the bigger NBFCs who have good rating. Would SIDBI or NABARD consider lending at this point in time?
Yeah, my understanding and belief is yes, because I don't think NABARD or SIDBI is really looking at the larger NBFCs. I think their remit is much more the medium and small NBFCs, and these are term loans. So these are not bonds, which is where the banks had a problem with this TLTRO money. These are essentially term loans and working capital loans. So my answer is yes, they should ideally address the small and medium borrowers.
Ravichandra Babu is asking, what should be really the size of the stimulus package that the government of India should actually announce in order to pull the country out of this economic crisis?
Well, we'll take your pick. I think there's also a question of how much money can we print, right? We're not America, so we can't print endlessly, I guess.
Right. You spoke about how this is the biggest ever crisis. Of course, it's not of the same scale, but a crisis that we saw earlier. Of course, there would be different points of view on that. Was related to demonetization and what it did to many industries, especially the small scale industry. How do you, on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate the COVID-19 versus the demo plus GST kind of a problem area?
Let's put it this way. I think the demo and GST were hugely disruptive, but they were not of the kind that, with exceptions. Of course, I know that some livelihoods were affected even then. But I think for most part, that was not the kind of blow which permanently destroyed businesses and livelihoods. My fear is that this time around that may happen. I hope I'm wrong. I pray that I'm wrong, but I do fear that this could be because, the length of time that this is likely to take and the extent of the disruption. Because when demo came, the large industries and the organized sector were unaffected, right? It was only the smaller guys, the unorganized guys who were affected. Of course, they were affected badly, but the rest of them were able to handhold them through this. Whereas now, yesterday I was on a TV show, somebody was saying big, huge corporations are now asking their small vendors for 30-day credit and 45-day credit, right? So now it's a very different kind of, in terms of magnitude, and therefore I fear that the long-term impact of this is likely, as I said, I'm hoping to be wrong, but I fear that it will be far more severe.
Okay. We are about 4 days before the lockdown. I mean, the decision will be taken whether to extend the lockdown. Some states are beginning to announce that, and whether the national lockdown will be extended or will it be only in specific red zones. Umesh Agrawal asks, what in your view, how should the lockdown be lifted in a manner that is practical? Otherwise, we will have a broken supply chain and the manufacturing sector will not really be able to open and operate. Also, the farmers may not be able to see their produce collected, and if the key mandis near the urban areas are closed due to the red zone. So there are problem areas, especially related to transportation and the manufacturing sector.
Correct. I mean, this is the classic conundrum of lives versus livelihoods, which the government is clearly grappling with. To me, the tragedy in this seems to be that your major urban centers, right? You take Delhi, Mumbai, Ahmedabad, Chennai, Hyderabad. I mean, I think Bangalore is the only one which is relatively spared, but otherwise all the big cities have been hit. So I think there has to be, I think Mr. Anand Mahindra has talked about it today, saying that, you have to do an opening up, but just be very, very strict about your containment zones, right? Completely shut off the containment zones, but all the other areas, subject to the protocols being followed, the social distancing, the hand hygiene, all of those things, start opening up. Because I think nobody knows the exact magic formula of how much to open and how much not to. But I think somewhere we have to take a step forward, because finally, I think the question becomes, is death by COVID the worst thing, or death by starvation the worst thing, right? And somewhere you need to find that balance between death by pandemic and death by starvation and start moving forward.
Right. You mentioned about Bangalore. The joke is that Corona could not really make much of an impact in Bangalore, probably because it got stuck in the traffic jam of Bangalore. One city that has been relatively unaffected so far. So you spoke about that the road ahead is going to be quite difficult, not very easy. If we were to have this conversation in April 2021, what kind of a scenario you think we are likely to discuss at that point in time? Or you hope to discuss at that point in time?
Okay. I would hope, that there have been relatively few mortalities in terms of institutions and businesses. That would be my first hope. Second would be that we've got back to some semblance of normality in terms of the pandemic, because sometimes it's frightening when people talk about a second wave and a third wave and stuff like that. So that is certainly a hope I have. And the third one is that asset quality, which is, I think, a key concern all around for anyone in the lending business. I would hope that the fears that have been raised about asset quality deterioration don't play out in full measure. There will be definitely deterioration in asset quality. There will be challenges in terms of recoveries for all lenders, but I would hope that it won't be so bad and that come April 21, we will all be more or less back on the rails.
Right. One more question coming pertaining to the real estate sector. Devesh Bhuva asks, do you feel that NBFC should come out boldly post COVID-19 to fund real estate projects, particularly budget homes, which cater to the middle class income segment, since home buying during this time will be coming at very competitive price, making it a viable and lucrative for the home buyer?
I can't give a generalized answer because I suppose it depends on the risk appetite of each lender. And the other thing I would slightly probably push back on is, I agree that prices may be a little attractive, etc. But will people, especially middle income groups, will they consider making such a large commitment at a time of such uncertainty, where people are fearing for their jobs, people are fearing for their health? Is this a time when they will go and take on fresh liabilities? Is a question to be asked.
Right. Umesh Agrawal asks, is SFB the next obvious path for the mid-sized NBFCs given issues with liability the last 4 years, ILFS, demonetization, now coronavirus? But the RBI guidelines relating to the promoter stake, domestic capital, business group and listing are the key issues. Can industry represent to ease rules for converting to an SFB?
I think we can, but I must sort of caution Umesh that an SFB is not a silver bullet, right? I mean, it's not an answer to every problem that mid-sized NBFCs have, right? SFB comes with its own regulatory rigor, and it's got its own challenges, because deposit raising for them from a retail franchise, effectively they have to compete with the larger banks. So even as an SFB, you have to compete with State Bank of India, because it's the same retail franchise, deposit franchise. So it's not a silver bullet, as I said, but in some instances, certainly yes. It's a valid business model.
Okay, we'll now take the last couple of questions. One question coming, the name isn't known, someone called JV. It says some NBFCs are of the view that their credit worthiness would get impacted if they were to take a moratorium from their banks. Would it be prudent for an NBFC to accept a moratorium if the banks were to offer one?
I think that's a very, very good question. In fact, for ourselves, we applied that same test and we said, we don't need a moratorium. So even if a bank offers it, we probably will not take it, because you're right. I don't know if it's right or wrong, but certainly the feeling is if you accepted a moratorium, somehow you put out a feeling that there is a weakness. And when that's not the case, why would you want to put out that message?
But would many NBFCs follow what you decided to do?
Well, I think many of the larger NBFCs and the well-run, stronger NBFCs, I think are in a similar situation. I think most of them have taken since it's only 3 months. Now, if the same thing, if it had been 12 months, I'm sure it would be a different story. Right? 3 months, I think most of us can live with it.
Right. Deepak Jain asks how private financiers address the problem arising out of asset recovery as we do not have full legal support.
I didn't get that question. I don't see for most of the small and retail financing NBFCs, the assets that we finance are typically vehicles, right? And with vehicles, usually repossession is quite a straightforward process. Of course, there are legalities involved. Sometimes there are problems, but it's asset recovery per se is not difficult. If he's talking about access to SARFAESI Act, that's a slightly different issue, but that's for larger ticket items. If you're typically financing vehicles like trucks, cars, so on and so forth, it's not such a big, not a major issue.
Okay. The last question, and this is related to the stock market. Is it a good time to invest in shares of NBFCs in the equity market, as there has been a huge correction? This is coming from Amit Rajni.
Okay, this is one question. In all honesty, I can say I know nothing about. I don't understand the stock market. So with your kind permission, I will pass on that one.
Okay, so great. listening to you. I'm glad you were able to take a large number of questions from our listeners. I'm sure many of their queries would have been answered. Thank you for your time and patience and a wonderful presentation with a lot of clarity. Thank you very much for joining us here on the Mitra Dialogues.
Thank
May
you,
I now
Sudhir.
request Shreyans to propose the vote of thanks.
Thank you, Mr. T.T. Srinivas Raghavan, for such a bold and candid interaction with us. And also, I would like to thank T.S. Sudhir for moderating yet another event for us. Also, our sponsor, Century Floor Mills, for sponsoring this entire webinar series. From SICI, the President, Mr. R. Ganapathy, we convey our sincere thanks. To Mr. Arun Alagappan, the Vice President of SICI as well, and Dr. Raghavan and his team. And also to all the participants who've joined us yet again today. We have a couple of interesting webinars again lined up for tomorrow and day after. Tomorrow it is Mr. Amaresh Ramaswamy, CEO, Microsoft R&D India Private Limited. He also reports directly to Satya Nadella. So we're talking to him on the future of technology in this entire post-COVID era. And on Friday, we have Dr. Ravi Prasad, former president of Coromandel International Limited. Again, it's on the agri sector, which we're talking to him. So we look forward to seeing you again on both these events as well.
Thanks, TT. Thanks a lot. Ganpa
Thank you.
signing off. And thanks, TS and Arun, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Stay safe, all of you. Bye.